figuring out how the ball changes in between. And then if you notice that frame 1 and frame 12 are identical, I can basically drag this up one and insert a keyframe just before it changes to how it looks originally. And then this end keyframe, it's still got a shape tween on it, that's why it's green. So if I click that last frame, I can just put the tween on none. So now it should loop effectively. So there's a number of different applications for this, but motion tweens are really the best way of animating symbols, because these only apply to drawings and they can be limited. You really need to think a shape tween through before you do it and decide what's going to be best. Another thing you can actually do is if I click on my colour mixer on my second major keyframe, I could change the colour here, such as the alpha, the brightness, etc. And the actual tween would still take that into account when it's animating it. If you drag this little red / crimson pinkish rectangle, you can move across your timeline with the mouse. And you may have also noticed there's an asterisk after my title here, and this close point, this close button, is occupied by a circle within the circle. And that's basically reminding me that I need to save my project. It hasn't been saved since the last major time I did something. So it's always good to save so you don't lose your progress. And when you do so, you'll notice the asterisk and the dot disappear. So that pretty much covers shape tweens. I'd try and keep fills and strokes in separate layers if you're using shape tweens on both. In some cases you can use more than one line or more than one fill, but generally speaking, try and keep them in their own separate keyframes and layers and everything. I'd also try and work efficiently, so keep your layers organised by, if you double click on the title, you can give it a name, and then you won't forget what you've got stored in that layer, and it just saves you getting complicated. And say I put a character in this back layer, and then I'm struggling to put a background on that now because it should really be in this major character layer, and its position's wrong, so I'd have to create another layer behind everything. You can also insert scenes just here, and you've also got a window, other panels, scene viewer. That's another panel that just allows you to navigate between scenes. But if your project isn't too big, it's a good idea to keep everything in one scene. I will cover motion guide layers and mask layers soon, but before we do that, I'm going to discuss the next type of tween, which is called a motion tween. Right, motion tweens can help you save a lot of time, and if you're a novice and not very well versed about frame by frame animation, i.e. drawing each individual frame, tweens can be really awesome. Basically, the computer calculates how the symbol changes from one keyframe to the next keyframe, and it animates the distance in between. You need to understand how symbols work and consider how the symbol will move. For instance, a side profile of a car can move from the left to the right and look tangible, or a forearm can rotate from the elbow to raise the arm. Consider where the symbol is moving from and to, and where it rotates from. The joint on the forearm is the elbow, the joint on the bicep is the shoulder, the joint on the hand is the wrist. These joints mark the center of rotation, or the orientation. Consider this as we create our first symbol. Right, now in this example we're going to create a robot arm it's a simple enough thing. It's certainly less complicated than a human arm, and it's just a good way of understanding motion tweens on the simplest level. So here's one I've already made earlier, but for the purposes of doing this, basically create 3 layers. I've already named them by the proper name. For your bicep you need something looking like a vertical rectangle. For your wrist, a horizontal one that's a bit thinner, and then some sort of shape like that for your hand. You might want to stretch that out so you've got a proper point to rotate from. And then select each one of these symbols with your black arrow and go to Modify, Convert to Symbol, and this will basically create a new symbol. Here you can enter the name of this, you can choose the type. We're going to be dealing with graphics. These are the most commonly used ones. Movie clips basically house animation, so I've made games before where all the actual movies just based in the first frame, and the movie clips stored in that first frame, and it just literally plays everything contained within it, and then I can put action script on that, which is like programming to actually navigate between the frames within that movie clip symbol. But graphics, they're good for like cell animation and stuff like that, so just create your layer like that, give it a name or whatever, and then you need to change the registration point. So see this little white circle in the center, just drag it up to wherever you want it to rotate from, and you can see how this differs from its center of rotation. So you've created all your separate symbols, so you need 3 of them, and then if you select all your different parts and go to Modify, Convert to Symbol, and then just call it Robot Arm or something, and this is a good way of working because you can work within a symbol. You can see here on scene 1 I've got my major symbol now, and it's giving me a bounds box which is blue that tells me its actual dimensions, and then I can double click the main symbol and I've got these sub symbols actually within that symbol, and these are all graphic symbols, so they've all got their own layer. I've got the bicep on the top, the wrist below it, and then the hand. And if you use the lock, you can lock these layers. You can make them of a specific colour and kind of transparent, and then you're good to go. You've got everything set up. So I'm just going to create a simple motion here. I'm working at 24 frames per second, but you should be working at 12. So if I go on frame 24 and insert a keyframe for the bicep, now I've got my end point, and go ahead and insert keyframes for the wrist and the hand at 24. So this is what it looks like when it returns to the start of the loop, if you will. And then in my midpoint I'm going to keep it in the same position again, because I basically want it to go up and then down. So now I find the point in between the middle point, which is about frame 6. So I'm inserting keyframes on all symbols, all the layers at keyframe 6. So we'll need another one at about 18. Now I always start with where the actual arm is rotating from, and in this case all the motion starts at the shoulders. So if you watch a boxer, for instance, you can see what punch he's about to throw by watching the shoulders, because that's where everything's starting out. And if you study anatomy, then you can learn how the body moves and different ways of predicting motion, etc. So I'm going to have it moving forward first, like that. This is basically my shoulder here, and then in frame 18 I'm going to have it moving back. So it's almost like a pendulum now. And next I'll worry about the wrist. You can see how the centre of rotation changes between these symbols. So as it's moving up, I want to move the forearm in, and then I'll just line up this point so it snaps to the same sort of point where it joins at the elbow, and then back in this case. And if you need to move a symbol with the arrows, you can use your arrow keys once it's selected, and if you hold shift you can move a greater distance each time. So now I've got